Listen to the strain, it plays once more for us. There it is again, the past in store for us. Wake in memory some forgotten song to break the rhythm driving us along and make harmony again, a last encore for us. Play, orchestra, play, play something sweet and light and gay. For we must have music, we must have music to drive our fears away. While our illusions dictate for us, let's have an orchestra score. In the confusions the years have made for us, serenade for us just once more. Life needn't be grey, though it is changing day by day, though a few old dreams may decay. Play, orchestra, play. Life needn't be grey, though it is changing day by day, though a few old dreams may decay. Play, orchestra, play, orchestra, play, orchestra, play.
I came down here straight away as soon as I could get sort of dressed and into a car, and the fire brigade chief came to me in the house next door and said he was quite sure it wasn't electrical because he'd been into where the switchboard was, and all the big main switches were all off, so it couldn't have been electrical. So we only assume it was vandals at the back because no one had been using it, it couldn't have been smoking.
The whole of the roof had burnt and fallen into the theatre itself, so that really the whole thing was a write-off. And when we settled the insurance claim, the stone walls of the old church, which are about 2 foot thick, still remained, and they were the only item that could be reused again. In fact, had they come down as well, we might have been even more grateful, but they remained and we had to accept them.
I didn't know where we could go from there, whether it could possibly be built again. It seemed an enormous task. I was on the management committee at that time, and we called an emergency meeting, and I even thought as I was coming along, I can remember driving along to Kenilworth thinking, maybe we shouldn't, maybe we should just call it a day and join with the Talisman.
Well, I visited on the Sunday morning for no particular reason that I now recall, and from the front nothing seemed amiss, but a sign saying danger, keep out, and further investigation revealed that everything behind was devastated.
As the people began to gather, heard about it, or came for an ordinary Sunday working party, their attitude was sort of, well, let's start clearing up now before the stuff had even stopped burning.
It was amazing to see the members turning up, and I think we had 25 skips in all in succession on the theatre frontage, and each weekend filled one of these and it was taken away. It really was hard, horrible work, very dirty. Everything was burnt and black, and at the end of the afternoon you were equally black.
I remember balancing on very narrow planks with with barrows. I don't think I ever actually fell off, but I thought I was going to many times.
Every week there was another skip which we used to fill, yes, and we used to load it into wheelbarrows, sort of balanced precariously on planks. We put in all the rubble. Sometimes a wheelbarrow would slip and come off, and then we've got to pick all the rubble up again. Then we'd rush up the slope into the skip, tip it in, and hope you didn't follow the wheelbarrow into the skip.
Saturday afternoon seemed to be my appointed hour, and when there was a number of others, in particular George Stratford, we used to spend the time shoveling away ashes and rubble and bricks and filthy mess each Saturday afternoon, and eventually the pile seemed to get smaller.
Initially, obviously, it was all the clearing out shipping everything round to the skip and getting everything tidied up, which seemed to take a long time, but once that was done, then you could see things beginning to start again.
Wheeling barrow loads of concrete was the worst job that I was involved in. That was a Saturday morning job normally, when a number of volunteers, in inverted commas, were invited by Helen Moscrop to attend the theatre slightly before the arrival of a mixed concrete lorry. And I suppose the worst moments were when the driver decided that he would no longer place the concrete into the wheelbarrows, but put the remainder onto the floor, which then involved loading the barrows as well as pushing them round.
First of all, we had the architect, who was marvellous. Without him, we could never have got on. Together with one of our members, Gerald Osborne, who's a surveyor, and two of them together made the early preparations possible. Without them, of course, we couldn't even start it.
We didn't seem to have many friends at the time, and Mr. Yule was on the phone to me at my office and was very sad that the theatre had burnt down and offered us £1,000 in cash, which I knew would be very welcome, and offered his firm to help out as and when required. And in the fullness of time, we certainly did use Yule's Builders to help put back items that the Priory team didn't think they could handle. This was all done at rates carefully negotiated by me with Yule, so that we didn't pay them too much, and they dealt, in fact, with some of the preliminary roof work so we could get the roof put back on by others, and all the doors and windows.
Obviously, we couldn't put the roof on. That needed it was a specialised job which needed a huge crane which reached right to the back. It was unbelievable. And the intriguing thing was that when they were lowering the roof principles in place, the crane driver couldn't see a thing. It was merely done by a man balancing on the ironwork of what is now the tower of the stage, giving signals to a man standing on the wall at the back of the auditorium, who then signalled to the crane driver, and this huge girder and pieces of metal would swing across to a man balanced on another girder. It frightened me to death watching it, I must say.
Obviously, we couldn't get theatre members building steel trusses spanning 20 or 30 feet, and some of the steel tower into which all the scenery would finally be hoisted out of sight. This sort of flying tower was probably 40 feet above ground level, so we couldn't possibly get theatre members to deal with that.
We were marvellously lucky about the whole thing in a way, that Derek should be chairman when the fire occurred, because at that time he had the time during the day to organise the whole thing, to get in touch with the architect, to get in touch with Gerald the surveyor, and to get the whole thing organised and started. I mean, he had connections with the local authority and all that Derek had, and the thing was then moving. Then, of course, we had the great luck to have Jeff come in his place, who was essentially a marvellous practical man, and so we had that luck of two absolutely ideal chairmen for each circumstance.
Derek Moore was obliged to move from the district, and so I was asked to take over, which I was very happy to do, because I was most anxious to see the place rebuilt, and what I could contribute in trying to organise the members to that end, I did my best to fulfil that particular job.
I must confess, I myself, I was very enthusiastic initially, and like everything else, probably perhaps because my tendency is brawn, not brain, I fell off a bit after the clearing up and the basic work of getting the concrete screed down and so on at the back, and I always felt slightly guilty that I didn't do more.
Bright was the day when you came to me. Someone had whispered your name to me. Someone had told me how fair you were. Then at last there you were. Dreams long forgotten revive again. Suddenly life seems to be alive again. I heard that melody start. Delicately, delicately in heart. This morning when I woke, the light was clear in the sky. A sweet wind murmured through the trees. A singing bird was singing very near in the sky. And in the breeze which drove the clouds so gaily by, I thought I heard a different note, a little sigh which seemed to say, this is your day, be careful please, be careful please, don't let this light enchantment fade away. This is your day, this is your day. Though we may never meet again, there'll never be a day so sweet again, deep in my heart. No matter what the troubled years may bring, a secret voice will ever sing. Bright was the day when you came to me. Someone had whispered your name to me. I heard the theme of your song before, far away, long before. Light was the music that played for me. You were the song destiny had made for me. I heard that melody start passionately, passionately in my heart.
Once the roof was on, then we could see for the first time the end of the tunnel. It was a long way away, but one could see it then with the roof on. And we could then work, of course, in the dry. We got all through the winter in snow and rain and wind, things like that. Now at least we're in the dry. It was still windy through all the gaps in the windows. And things began to move. We could create things then.
The women took an enormous part in the building of the new theatre. They did an awful lot of clearing up, but not only did they do that, but they had templates made for them to cut out wood that could be put down in the auditorium for the seats to go on.
Jeff Dash was in his element. The care that had to be taken in the construction to avoid creaks and groans from the timber ultimately when people in the audience moved in, it all speaks very highly of Jeff's competence.
First of all, I started helping to clear rubble, and then I seemed to be involved in mixing concrete, and then climbing that loft scaffolding, painting strips of metal on the roof. The roof is some kind of felt or something like that, with metal strips in between, and the painting of the metal strips was as a preservative, actually. And to say that my wife was shocked when she saw what I've been doing is an understatement.
Of course, the bulk of the money for the rebuilding came from the insurance, but immediately House appeal was made by dropping leaflets, which brought some money in. And then various organisations were contacted, charitable organisations and the local council, and a considerable sum of money was raised from these sources. And of course the members organised various events which also contributed to the fundraising, and people like Howard Burgess and John Evans did an enormous amount of work in tapping other sources for money.
We were roughly paid £25,000 under the insurance. We raised another £5,000 in cash, so we actually spent £30,000. And at the end of the day, after 2 years of rebuilding, we insured the building for £70,000.
I can remember there was great discussions about sight lines, the stage, whether we should have the stage very high or low, where we should have toilets and all sorts of things like that. But I think really the biggest discussion was about the seats in the auditorium, how high they should be, where they should go, whether they should be staggered, whether we should have a centre aisle or side aisles and things like that. There was an awful lot to be done.
I also contributed towards building the auditorium. The stairs leading down, interestingly, one day we were 1/4 of an inch out, I think, between the depths of one of the treads and the next. And George Tisdale, walking down one day, said, "That one is out," without any measurement, and he was right. It was 1/4 of an inch difference.
I remember Jeff spending many hours constructing almost single-handed the staircase leading from the foyer up to the circle and the bar, and also the tiering for the seating in the auditorium.
Dave Gardner involved me in helping to rebuild the bar area, and it so happened that he transferred to other jobs, and I found myself more or less building the bar as my main occupation.
We designed the bar, and then this is where Howard came in, so I started off, Howard joined me and carried on finishing the middle of the bar and setting the whole bar up, which personally I couldn't think of opening a theatre without a bar.
The floor was very badly damaged and that had to be covered. I think my one regret is my artistic endeavours with Donald in building mosaic floor with all the odd pieces of 5 plywood, which eventually was covered up with linoleum so that our artistic works disappeared.
David Gardner did incredibly well, I thought, because it was a very expensive building to heat, and he obtained at very reasonable prices all the materials, and then what's more, put it all together himself. He was often working on his own, and he saved the theatre thousands of pounds, no doubt about that.
I apparently was the only one around who had some idea of what the pipework was, and I just started from there, and I scrounged, begged, borrowed, stole bits and pieces. I bought the pipe, but the only thing, and with the assistance of 1 or 2 others, we did the toilets, etc., and then eventually the central heating.
People such as Steve Walland, who designed all the lighting system, put in a tremendous amount of work on the physical side of actually doing the work. People like Keith Morris, who was a stalwart up at the top of piles of scaffolding, precarious heights, regularly every weekend.
Tim Cranberry, of course, was another who was seen around very frequently, helping towards the ultimate end of getting the theatre going again. And he was, again, as many of us, jack of all trades. I think we all had concern and were proud in the end that we never did have any serious accident occurring during the building of the theatre.
We went to Warwick University, to the Talisman, to the Loft, to the Belgrade Studio. Still carrying on as best we could. Doing the normal plays, the sets were often a bit basic, they had to be, because the people who were making sets normally were busy on the theatre anyway. That was a riot, of course, because the stage was only just finished. Half the floorboards, the big plywood boards on the stage weren't fastened down, so when people scampered about playing games on New Year's Eve, the bang and the rattle was quite amazing.
The worst time for me during the reconstruction was at the point in time when we had to decide to postpone the reopening, which we had in fact already planned, We had a special general meeting, and there was so much work still to be done that the eventual, and I suppose inevitable conclusion was that we would have to put the reopening off. But it did seem to be a momentous blow when everybody's enthusiasm was beginning to come to an end.
It's an extraordinary thing. The major works can get done very quickly, and then the last finishing pieces take so much time, and it was so in the theatre. And we found that as we finished this bit, there was another bit to be done, and as we finished that bit, so it went on, and time went with it.
A lot of the skilled work was avoided by using solutions that didn't necessarily need to be very skillful in their execution. For instance, we were going to plaster the whole of the theatre out, as it had been plastered originally, which would have cost £1,000 or £2. But in the end, we purchased for £20 or so a Tyrolean spray machine, and this was wielded by a rota of members and directed at the walls and splattered over the walls by all sorts of people, willing but inexperienced, and this in the end produced a very satisfactory result.
There was always somebody there, there was always something going on. The planners, the Geralds and the Derricks and the Georges and so on were always hard at it with their plans and so on. No, I always felt confident that it would come. Whether by the date which was set, I didn't know, but I knew it was going to come.
We had confidence in George Tisdale. He was a tower of strength. There were others who were always available to give advice.
There was a great deal of panic. We had set ourselves 2 years, I think, and the first play was scheduled. The main part was finished, but it was the finishing off jobs to be done, the painting, the decor, things like that, curtains and fitments. They all took an enormous amount of time, and really at one stage I think we thought of postponing the first play.
I got married and I nearly had a divorce on my hands before I even got married because I was spending that much time actually down the theatre. And I was involved with the first production as well. And we bought a house that needed a lot of work doing to it, and my wife kept saying, when am I going to do some work there?
There were even suggestions that perhaps to try to finish it earlier we might forego certain aspects of the rebuilding, but we held a meeting and it was generally agreed that indeed we should finish it as originally planned, and we redoubled our efforts together with some tremendous help from the Talisman. We got the thing.
Maybe it's something to do with spring. I feel no.
We had publicity in the paper and people knew all about it, and they turned up in droves, the people did. We took them round, they were all most intrigued and most interested,
A feeling I
and it
can't
proved very successful
explain.
indeed.
A sort of lilt in the air, a lyrical loveliness seems everywhere.
We didn't think that we'd have it finished in time for the opening anyway, because we set 1 or 2 deadlines, which everyone knew we'd never make, but we finally had to make a deadline. We scrambled towards that, and I think the word is scramble. I took my holidays actually that last year, making the flats ready for the opening. And the Italian straw had given me so many flats that nature ever does is 7 years to come.
You see exactly what I mean.
Feelings were mixed, not only very grateful that everybody had pulled together so well, achieved the rebuilding, but also very proud to be present in the reopening play.
There was a definite atmosphere with things like you could still smell the wet paint and that sort of thing. And the general reaction from the public was they were very impressed. I think you could see on the whole that they didn't think we were going to make it, particularly after the setback earlier in the year. It was quite a festive spirit.
I think there was a tremendous enthusiasm when it came to getting the thing going again. I was involved in a minor way in the Straw Hat, of course, and, well, the dressing room arrangements, of course, were somewhat cramped with a large cast, but it was great when that went up on the stage.
A lyrical loveliness.
I don't think you can really believe it. It's been so long, it took 2 years, really hard work for so many people. And now it all was complete. Once when the lights went down, the curtain went up, that was the end of an era and the starting of another era.
Ive Davis, who was house manager that night, came on and introduced me, and I said a few words which I had previously prepared in my usual doggerel fashion and cut a tape.
It's probably more nerve-wracking than being in just an ordinary play.
Blind fear.
I wouldn't say exactly.
Ah, but it was my first time.
It was a very large play with a lot of sets, and I think it gave everybody a good opportunity to try the theatre out in its first show.
Dan gave the new members a chance to join in with an actual production.
Besides, why should I kiss you?
Why shouldn't you? We're cousins, aren't we?
Felix, you invited me here this morning to see Mr. Fantina's wedding presents.
But there's time for a kiss too, you know.
My opinion would always be that somebody did it quite deliberately by igniting a fire underneath the formerly open stage area at the back of the theatre. But nobody was ever prosecuted, and we shall never know for sure.
Play, orchestra, play something sweet and light and gay. For we must have music to drive our fears away. While our illusions swiftly for us, let's have an orchestra score. In the confusions the years have made for us, serenade for us just once more. Life needn't be grey, though it is changing day by day, though a few old dreams may decay. Play, orchestra, play. Life needn't be grey, though it is changing day by day, though a few old dreams may decay. Play, orchestra, play, orchestra, play, orchestra, play.
This is BBC in the Midlands.
Being in a theatre, I'm tempted to use a theatrical expression like to be or not to be. And yet that really was the question hanging over the whole future of the Priory Theatre just 2 years ago. I mean, can you imagine this impressive stage and auditorium, just a burnt-out wreck, 4 walls standing amid a sea of bricks and rubble? Do we give up? Or does the show go on, was the second question, and it didn't take long to reach an answer.
There's no people like show, people they smile when they are low.
Even with a turkey that you know has fallen.
The members have spent thousands of pounds and thousands of hours recreating the theatre. If anything, it's slightly better now. The stage is bigger and facilities improved. A question of love's labours not being lost.
Tell me what the theatre was like when you saw it immediately after the fire.
Well, there was very little left, just the 4 walls and a mountain of debris, twisted wires, burnt seats, little bits of stage, no scenery at all, and heaps and heaps of slate on the floor, with everything tangled up among it.
Did you decide almost immediately, right, we're going to rebuild?
There was never any other thought. People even started to clear up while the embers were still hot almost.
That, in fact, must have been one of the big problems, just literally clearing up the rubble.
Well, it took us several weeks. We were knee-deep in these slates I spoke about, and we had to disentangle the great beams that have come tumbling down, untangle the wires, get it out, put it into skips to be taken away. And this only at weekends.
Yes, of course. Did you ever have to bring in any professional experts to help?
In some of the building, yes, because, for example, we couldn't have coped with all the steelwork for the fly tower and the roof. It was far too high and far too heavy. It needed cranes to put it in place.
Was there ever a time when you thought, really, we've bitten off rather more than we can chew?
No, I don't think so, no.
You never ever felt like giving up?
Oh no, because once we started, then one could see the end, even though it's a long way off.
You're just a few hours away, really, now from the opening night. How's everybody feeling?
Well, very excited. It's rather a special first night, isn't it?
Oh, the bridegroom.
Young man, it's all off. Shh! Don't shush me.
Pipe down, can't you?
Pipe down yourself, you Sardanapalus.
Never mind. It's all right. Sent. His shoes are pinching him. He was limping pretty badly. Look, we've only got a matter of minutes in which to avoid a massacre.
Ah, massacre. Explain yourself. Stop talking like the press.
Look, the brute has got my address. He's coming here with a mouthful of daggers and an armful of pistols. We must get this lady out of here.
I should think we must. Bluebeard.
We've had delays. We should have opened in June. We had set a June opening initially, but it just wasn't feasible. We've only just got finished now, in point of fact. There are things which won't be done which we would have liked done. But now, well, yes, it's been a case of, oh dear, will we? But it's super now to feel that we are going to.
Well, how do you feel about tomorrow night?
Apprehensive when you've got a large cast and a stage which you haven't used before, with a play with 5 sets. It's a little bit harrowing, but we've got a full house and it's generally members tomorrow night, so I think the atmosphere is going to be really tremendous.
You're going to be seeing people walking into your theatre.
Yes, we had an open day a fortnight ago and we had people round, and then it gave you a feeling in a pit of your stomach that, good heavens, we've made it. And so many people were so impressed with what we'd done. And to actually see a real audience coming in tomorrow is going to be absolutely super, really.
You can't just kidnap my wife like this at midnight.
I defy you to stop me, sir.
I certainly will. There's a
Let go of that, sir. Let go.
Oh, be careful with that hat. It's genuine Italian straw.
What? He said Italian straw.
Yes, it's my wedding present. Had it sent from Florence. Cost me 500 francs.
He said Florence. Here, you look at that. I don't believe it. It's impossible. Here I've been, and all the time, the hat was here.